Okay.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to those in attendance at this remote meeting of the local review body of Aberdeen City Council. Please note that this meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. You're also reminded to note that we may have members of the public or press observing today's proceedings. Can I ask those who are observing today's meeting to keep their microphones and cameras switched off? But can all members of the local review body please leave their cameras on, but mute their microphone when not speaking? Thank you. As the local review body contains quasi-judicial business, hold on a second. There we go. As this local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the meeting during consideration of any of these reviews. This meeting has been convened in response to 2 requests for review of the decision taken by appointed officers under the Council scheme of delegation. Members of the local review body have before them copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. All of the members present.
Sorry, your camera just froze for a moment there, Councillor McCrae. Could you maybe just repeat the last sentence just for the external members?
Yep. So the meeting has been convened in response to 2 requests for review of the decision taken by the appointed officer under the Council scheme of delegation. Members of the local review body have before them copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. I will now call Ms McBain, the Assistant Clerk, to outline the procedure to be followed in the conduct of these reviews and to take a roll call of the members present. Ms McBain.
Thank you, Chairperson. Members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. From this, it is clear that the first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and that it is meant without further information or representations. To assist, I feel it would be helpful to mention the following. Firstly, that the regulations governing the LRB process requires that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review. Secondly, that the focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. Thirdly, to note that the modernisation of the planning system, which included revisal of the planning appeals process, of which this local review body is part, removed the previous right on the part of an applicant to insist on a hearing and replace that with the local review body, providing them with the power to choose a procedure which more accurately reflects the facts and circumstances of the individual case. And lastly, that guidance issued by the Scottish Government's Chief Planner in 2011 stated that reviews by LRBs should be conducted by means of full consideration of the application afresh. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. I'll just quickly make sure all 5 members are present, so please just indicate that you're here. So Councillor McCrae.
Present.
Councillor Crockett.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Copeland.
Present.
Okay, and Councillor Bowes.
Present.
Okay, so that's all 5 members present. So back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McBain. Turn to consideration of the first review in respect to the decision to refuse the application for the change of use from commercial office space into 2 number of residential dwellings, including formation of patio doors from existing window opening, window enlargement to form new openings with Juliet balconies, replacement door and installation of roof lights to the rear, reinstatement of railings and gate to the front, formation of car parking and landscaping works with associated boundary treatment at the rear at number 11 Victoria Street, Aberdeen, planning reference number 220517. We will now hear from Planning Advisor in attendance, Ms Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would point out that Ms Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in the earlier consideration of the application under review. Ms Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Ms Green.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen with the presentation. Okay, you should be able to see that now. So, as was mentioned, this is a request for a view against an application refused under delegated powers for change of use from offices to form 2 residential flats, etc. And the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit of 3 months following the decision of the appointed officer. And the applicant has indicated on the notice of review that there are no new matters that have been raised in the review submissions. So in terms of procedure by which the review will be conducted, the applicant has expressed the view that we may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll provide some further background information on the case before handing back for members to discuss the case and ask any questions and decide how to proceed. So moving on to the location plan. The site's located on the east side of Victoria Street, just north of its junction with Albine Place and south of its junction with Thistle Street, Waverley Place. And it lies within the Albine Place Rubislaw Conservation Area. The site comprises a traditional Category C listed 2-storey with attic end terraced granite property of a block of 3, and it was constructed around 1850. And there's also a 2-storey modern extension to the rear, which dates from the early 1990s. The property's currently vacant, was previously in use as an office. The front garden is bounded by a low granite wall, and the rear is in hard standing, and it's enclosed along the northern boundary by a random rubble wall with a red brick coping. And it provides an area of car parking accessed from the service lane via Thistle Place. So parking's accessed via that route. Just move on to the aerial photograph. It is not particularly clear, that one, but that's the property there, fronting onto Victoria Street. And that's the rear curtilage, the unadopted lane, and then this lane out onto Victoria Street. 3D image. So that's the rear of the property there. Victoria Street, just there, front of the building. So moving on to the layout plans. These plans just show the downtakings. So this is the front of the building on Victoria Street. And this is the rear extension. So there'll be one flat created within this area on 3 levels, and then another flat within the modern extension to the rear. And this is the layout plan for the ground floor. So you can see this is the frontage onto Victoria Street. One property would be created within here, opening locked up there. And then this is the rear extension and the rear garden, which would be divided into a garden here for the the flat at the rear, and then a parking space and garden here with a passageway. So the flat that fronts onto Victoria Street would have this rear access as well coming through, and the other flat would be accessed by this route from the rear lane. So these are the upper floor plans. The windows to be replaced at the rear, I'll show you the elevation in a moment, but they would be replaced in timber, finished in white. Juliet balconies would be formed, and new French doors. So that's the first floor plan. One flat to the front and the other one to the rear. And then at second floor level, you can just see the roof lights that would be installed there for the flat to the rear. And that's cross section showing the property to Victoria Street and the rear extension there. In terms of elevations, this is the Victoria Street elevation, no changes to that, and the rear extension where the existing windows would be increased in height so that you'd have these Juliet balconies at first floor level, and then the patio doors at ground floor level. And there's also a number of 3D images which are online, and I can show later if members wish. So just looking at the rear area, I've just zoomed in on that. A new masonry wall would be erected along the south side, and then timber fences would form garden for the rear flat and parking space and garden for the flat to the front. And then at the front of the property, this is just showing this is the existing situation where there's a low granite wall. Proposed is that railings would be installed along the front of the wall there. And that's just showing the railings that would be installed along the front. That's the new boundary wall to the rear, and then the fence that would be alongside the path to the rear. So turning to the reasons for refusal, these are summarised on this slide, but they're in full in the agenda. Firstly, that there would be an unacceptable level of residential amenity for the one-bed flat to the rear, that there would be an unacceptable level of private amenity space for the three-bed flat, that the flat to the rear would have a single aspect to the east with limited sunlight into the internal space, and that it would be accessed off an unlit, unadopted service lane, and also that the property to the rear would have no public face to the street, and it would be accessed through the lane. So the reason for refusal also included that it wouldn't fit with the established pattern of street-facing buildings, and overall that it would be contrary to policies D1 on design and D2 on amenity in the new local development plan 2023, and in terms of national planning framework, it'd be contrary to policy 14 on design and policy 16 on quality homes, and there'd also be tension with transport policy in the LDP. For the applicant's case, the applicant stated that the principle of residential use is acceptable for the area and for the property, in terms of policy B3 of that's the West End areas policy. It's acknowledged that the proposal would have no adverse impact on the character of the conservation area, acknowledged by the case officer, that is, that the proposal would suitably address the aims of Policy 1. This is the National Planning Framework policies on tackling climate change and the nature crises, climate mitigation, biodiversity, and also it would be reuse of a building in terms of Policy 9. That it suitably accords with the aims of historic environment policy for Scotland and the policies in the LDP on the historic environment, and that in terms of waste management, that would comply with the policy on that. Zero Waste Policy 12, that again is the reuse of the building. And Policy 13, Sustainable Transport. They're also all satisfied. The applicant's case continued and stated that the property was originally built as a house and has lain empty for 3 years. That the 3-bed flat to the front west side and to the rear east, the applicant would be willing to change the car parking to a garden. That the 1-bed flat has a garden and pleasant surroundings, including a view of the church sanctuary, and that access is from a well-used lane and it's a safe area. Also that the property is close to Rubislaw Terrace Gardens, which has cafes and facilities and fits in terms of local living. They make the point that single aspect residential dwellings are a common feature in the area, that the property has large windows and the living space is at first floor level. That's on the rear flat. They cite an example of a recently approved application at number 2 Rubislaw Place, which was a change of use to 2 flats. They state that the lane is shorter than many driveways at 15 metres long, and that the applicant would accept a condition for lighting fixed to the boundary wall. Also that the rear flat does have a public frontage, which is to the lane, and it's a lane that's used to access other properties. Also that the alternative would be a shared access for both flats from Victoria Street, and that wouldn't be such an acceptable solution. So in terms of consultations, there were no objections from the roads team, no comments from environmental health, and from the waste team there was no objection. Just on the waste team's response, that was on the basis that residents would use a communal street bin. On further investigation, the waste team have now considered the fact that residents from the rear flat would need to walk more than the guidance 30 metres to the bins if they were to use the communal waste bins. So which would mean that there would be an objection from the waste team. However, that could potentially be resolved by bins being provided at the rear of the property. So it's just something to consider if members were minded to approve the application. City Centre Community Council, there were no comments received. There were no representations. So the applicants expressed the view that no further procedure is required. So I'll hand back to members to consider how they wish to proceed. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Green. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, remember that if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request that further written information be provided, hearings be arranged, or a site visit be undertaken. But as Ms. Green has just stated, the applicant has stated in the review document that no further procedure is required before determination. At this moment, I feel that I have sufficient information to proceed with this at the moment. Councillor Clark.
Likewise, I feel I've got sufficient evidence to continue.
Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, I think we've got sufficient evidence, but I would like to ask a few questions.
Certainly. Councillor Crockett.
Thanks, Gavina. Yes, I agree. We've got enough evidence.
And Councillor Bouse.
Actually, I think we've got enough information. Thanks.
Thank you. As members feel they have sufficient information, we will now hear from Ms Green on the relevant policies and considerations for this review.
Thank you. Just a moment to pull up the slides again. Right. In terms of policies from the National Planning Framework, policies 1, 2 and 3 are overarching and relevant to almost every application. Policy 7 relates to the impact on conservation areas and listed buildings. Policy 9, as mentioned by the applicant, this is the reuse of a building, which is something that's supported by Policy 9. Policy 12 also promotes the reuse of buildings. Policy 13 relates to sustainable transport and the aim that developments are accessible by a range of modes of transport. And policy 14 and 16 I'll come on to in a moment on separate slides. So policy 14, really the aim of this is that proposals will be designed to improve the quality of areas. And there's a number of qualities for successful places that are stated within that. One of those, the first one in particular, healthy, supports the prioritisation of women's safety, and later on in the National Planning Framework, it looks at things like street lighting as one of the elements of that. I won't go through all the other qualities. I'll move on to the next slide, which is policies from the local plan. So in terms of the development plan considerations, the local development plan 2023 has been adopted today. So it's only policies from that plan that we will consider. Although the report obviously mentions the adopted plan from 2017, but the policy in this instance, policies cover the same subjects. So the site is zoned under VC6, the West End area, and that policy accepts residential use. Policy 1, D1, in terms of quality placemaking, I've got a separate slide on that, and the same for policy D2, so I'll move past those. Policy D6 seeks to preserve and enhance conservation areas. D8 encourages the retention of historic features such as windows and doors. Policy R5 on waste management, that states that developments should ensure that the space available for waste storage. And policy T2, developments should be accessible by a range of modes of transport. And finally, policy T3, that states that low or no car development is acceptable within this area. And then looking at historic environment policy for Scotland and the Albine Place conservation area character appraisal, those both cover the impact on the character of the conservation area, which wasn't used by the case officer as a reason for refusal. So I'll look further at the policies that were used. One of those is policy D2 on amenity. And this has quite a large number of criteria in order to ensure an amenity of future residents. So things like optimizing views and sunlight through siting and layout and orientation, adequate levels of amenity in relation to daylight and sunlight. This third criteria, have a public face to the street, is relevant. Refuse storage is relevant in this case, cycle storage. Privacy, that wasn't mentioned as an issue by the case officer. Private external amenity space, that was noted in the reason for refusal. That also relates to amenity space, usually for larger developments. And then again, this one, ensure all residents have access to usable private and semi-private open space. And development should have a private face to an enclosed garden or court to ensure sense of safety and enclosure. We'll just move on to design policy D1. Again, that talks about ensuring high standards of design with a sense of place. And there's 6 criteria, which are actually slightly different to the ones in NPF 4, but what they cover is generally the same. And the policy also recognises that not all development will be of a scale that makes a significant placemaking impact, but it recognises that good design and detail adds to the attractiveness of the built environment. So finally, moving on to the basis for the evaluation, primacy of the development plan, which now consists of the National Planning Framework and the 2023 Local Development Plan. So all applications should be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And each application must be treated on its own merits. So the basis for the decision would be, would the proposal comply with the West End area policy? How would the proposal affect the character and amenity of the area? And would there be satisfactory level of amenity for future residents as set out in the design policy and D2, the amenity policy, including the means of access, internal daylighting and outdoor space. Waste collection, is there an acceptable arrangement for that? And are the proposals acceptable in terms of impact on the conservation area and listed building? So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan, or are there material considerations that would weigh against? So I'll hand back to members and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Do members have any questions? Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, convener. I've got 2 or 3 for Ms. Green, if I can. First one is there any other residential properties facing onto the lane at the back? And if there is, what are the bin arrangements? Does the bin lorry go up the back? Because we heard that the rear flat would have to put a bin out the back. So is there currently a collection goes up that lane to collect the bin?
I don't think there are residential properties that front onto the lane that goes off Thistle Place. However, I had a discussion with the waste team this morning, and there would be an acceptable arrangement whereby the rear flat could keep bins within their garden and take them down to Thistle Place to be collected. That would be an acceptable arrangement.
Okay, second one, if I can continue, convener. I note from the plans that the 3-bedroom flat at front only has windows for daylight at the front of the building. Is that right? So the rear rooms have no natural daylight, is that right?
They would only have daylight to the rear rooms on the top level, the 2nd floor.
Okay, and then the rear flat, the only windows on there would be the patio doors, the windows at ground floor level, is that right? Or is there a window further up as well?
And they have windows out on every level on the ground floor and the 1st floor to the east.
Yeah, that's for the rear flat, yeah.
Yes, that's for the rear flat, yes.
Okay, and the access basically is up the side of the building. Can you go back to the slide that shows the actual building and the one next door as well, together. Sorry for hogging it, folks.
Just a moment, Tom. Was this the 3D?
No, it's the actual picture of the building as it is just now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. Right.
Yeah.
Now, the subject is the one to the right. Is that right? That two sticks at the back. It's the one to the right. Yeah, where your cursor is now. That's
Yeah.
it there.
That's yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I take it the wall on the right-hand side's a solid wall, is it?
This one.
No, the wall
Oh,
of that
sorry.
building. There's no windows in the side of that building.
No.
Right. Okay. And that what appears to be a little door just on the left of that building. Yeah, there. Is that the proposed access for the flat and also the rear access for the front flat?
Yes. Yeah. The windows would be altered. They would be enlarged by cutting the height down, but that doorway would be for the access. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then this parking space at the back be split in two. Yeah.
Yes, it'd be a garden
and
and then a parking space and garden.
Right, but that looks like it's shared with the building next door at the moment.
There would be a wall built along here.
Right. Okay. That's fine. Thank you very much. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Copeland. Councillor Crockett.
Thank you. And, you know, one part of my question was just covered there. But the wall, you mentioned the wall, and the proposal, I think, from the applicant is that they might accept a condition to have lighting on that wall. And I just wondered if we can impose the that lighting and any form of lighting.
We could condition that they put lighting on their own property, yes, and we could, look at the details of what that would be within the condition.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Crockett. Do any other members have questions? I'm not seeing any indication at this moment. So in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I'd like to highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. Does anyone wish to have any discussion on this case?
No.
Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, Convener. To me, it's a very close decision, and you know, I think I'm influenced by that, the lighting to take that, and I think that we should be very enthusiastic. I think to get residential into that area, I think it's a high priority for us, and if we can satisfy ourselves that the policies are being attempted to be met, then I think that we should favour the proposal. And I think the applicant seems to have gone to a lot of trouble to deal with a lot of the sort of green issues and so forth that we're looking at. And that would be my thoughts, Convener.
Thank you much, Ms. Councillor Crockett. Does anyone else wish to enter into discussion?
Yes.
Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'm a bit worried about daylight to the rear of the front flat. And I didn't see any sky. Well, they've got the windows on the top. It just causes me a bit of concern that the first floor rooms have got appear to have no natural sunlight. And I feel that is a concern on this. But I mean, I do agree with Councillor Crockett. The principle is let's get empty buildings occupied and have an assumption for residential. But I do have concerns about the lack of daylight on the 3-bedroom flat, only having the front windows. And I kind of see a way around that, quite frankly, because the upper floor has got windows at the rear, not up in the attic. But it's that middle floor that bothers me.
Councillor Crockett.
I think it's a good point that that Councillor Copeland raises. I wonder if we can look at the picture again to see. From my memory, I think it was like a bathroom and so forth at the back. But is there a room without windows? Could we have a wee look at the plan there?
Yeah, Ms. Green, are you able to pull up that plan?
Yeah, it is a bathroom. Just sorry.
Okay, Councillor Copeland, if you, in
Sorry.
terms of the, no, it's okay. Just while you're doing that, in terms of the bathroom, I would take it would be sufficient ventilation in that room by means of mechanical extraction, as well as sufficient lighting within that for, in terms of the use of a bathroom.
Yeah, my concern, Convener, if I may interject, is it's a 3-bedroom property. Is it only a bathroom is going to be at the back? Because otherwise a bedroom at the back of the building has no natural sunlight, no windows. If it's a bedroom on the first floor, there's only the attic space would have windows at the back, and the first floor doesn't have any windows at all, unless it's at the front of the building. And that's the concern I have.
That's the, if you can see that, that's the first floor plan with the bathroom at the back. And the bedroom has the windows onto Victoria Street.
Okay.
Yes, there's only one bedroom on the first floor, which has windows.
Yeah.
The 2 bedrooms upstairs have windows. So.
That's a comfort.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Crockett.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, are members happy to turn to determination?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, we'll now move to determination of this application. At this moment, I would be happy to overturn the refusal on this. I think with the information that we've been provided with, I am more than happy in terms of policy 9 of the reuse of the building to return the space back into residential use. And with the questions that we've an answer that we've just seen, the only areas that would be without sunlight is bathrooms, and of course that would be lit internally as well as mechanical ventilation. Meanwhile, the livable spaces do have windows and would face onto either side of the property. So in that respect, I would be happy to overturn the refusal on this. I'll now turn to the members. Councillor Bowes.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, no, I think share many thoughts with yourself. I too had concerns around the lighting, but I think that questioning and the clarity we received from that was very helpful. So in terms of policy 9, I agree. My concerns around policy around amenity are now extinguished thanks to that questioning. So to overturn the application, the officer recommendation in this case.
Thank you much. Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, I'd be happy to go with you, Convener, with a condition regarding lighting at the back.
Absolutely. Councillor Crockett.
Same as Councillor Copeland. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Yes, I'm happy to go along with yourself, Councillor McRae. My only worry was the flats at the back with the lighting, but I'm satisfied that the wall is going to have lighting, which will make it a lot brighter in that area. The concern about the bins, yes, they're going to get an extra bin to take round to the front themselves. I'm satisfied and I'm happy to proceed.
Thank you, members. As the local review body has a
You've gone mute, Kieran.
Councillor McRae, I think. Oh, he's crashed. Right, hold on.
think I should be back online now. Can members
that's you
see
back,
and
yeah.
hear? Perfect, thank you. So as the local review body has agreed to overturn the decision of the appointed officer, we now need to consider whether any conditions should be attached to the approval of the application. As we have discussed the condition of lighting to the rear boundary wall, are members content with that condition?
Agreed.
Okay. Now that the LRB has taken a decision, the planning advisor to assist with any required conditions, we've now covered that. Okay, anything else to add, Ms. Green?
I was just going to ask whether you would consider it necessary to put a condition on about the bins, because we don't have details of bin storage at the moment.
Okay.
Agreed.
I think members were inclined to place bins to the rear property for that to be taken down to Thistle Lane on bin collection days. Is that correct, members?
Yeah. Well, maybe suitable arrangements for bin collection may be the condition.
Yeah. Councillor Clark.
Would it be possible, I know we're saying that the bins go on to Victoria Street, but there is property in Thistle Place. And would it be possible that instead of them walking right round to the front with the bins, that they could be picked up on the Thistle Place collection?
Yes, they would be. They would only need to take them down to Thistle Place. So the condition that I was sort of suggesting was just for a storage area on the property for the bins. Because yeah, the residents from the rear could take them down to Thistle Place.
Thank you.
Yep, I think I'd be happy for that condition to be placed into the application. Perfect. Okay. Thank you, members. Please note that decision notice from today's meeting will be issued to the applicant or agent in the forthcoming days. Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Turn to consideration of the second review in respect to the decision to refuse the application of the installation of 2 roof lights at 4 Thistle Lane, Aberdeen, planning reference 230303. We will now hear from planning advisor in attendance, Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would again point out that Ms. Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in the early consideration of the planning under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect her role will be a neutral one, involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Ms. Green, back to you again.
Thank you. Right. Just share my screen again. So this case relates to request for review against refusal of an application under delegated powers for it's a retrospective application for 2 roof lights at 4 Thistle Lane, and the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the 3 months following the decision of the appointed officer. The applicant indicated on the notice of review that there were no new matters raised in the submissions. However, it is noticed that in the statement of support there is reference to a new matter, which I'll mention in my presentation. In terms of procedure, the applicant has expressed the view that a site visit should take place, and that the review shouldn't proceed on the basis of the information submitted. And the reasons given by the applicant are for members to view the context, setting and visual aesthetics of the roof lights within the surrounding area. So I'll provide some background information on the case before handing back for members to discuss and decide how to proceed. So turning to the location plan, the property to which the application relates isn't listed, but these properties are listed along the street frontage there. It lies within the Albine Place and Rubislaw Conservation Area, and the applicant has stated within the application that it was constructed in the 1970s. It's a single-storey mews cottage finished in rough cast renderings with a slated roof, and the northeast gable abuts Thistle Lane just there, with the southeast elevation where the roof lights are located hard up against the boundary there. And the terrace of properties to the west are category B listed, but because the building was built in the 1970s, it wouldn't be included in the listing of the property on Victoria Street. So I'll just move on to an aerial photo of the property. And you can see it, that's it there. The roof lights hadn't been installed at this point. So I've got a 3D view as well. So it's that roof slope, the one that you can't see very well in this image, where the roof lights would be or are. And that's the property there with the entrance on this side. Ground floor plan, just showing the two roof lights. And they're each 1600 high by 940 millimeters wide, made from a composite material and finished in dark grey. Just moving on to the elevation. That's there. So a couple of photographs that were taken by the case officer showing the roof lights in place. From further down Thistle Lane. And then the applicant also put photographs in their submissions, so I've put those in. Just see the roof lights. So moving on to the reasons for refusal. They can be summarised as follows. The roof lights are not designed with due consideration to the context in terms of their scale relative to the roof slope, and that they don't preserve and enhance the character of the conservation area or the setting of nearby listed buildings, and are therefore contrary to historic environment policy for Scotland and managing change in the historic environment guidance on windows and setting. That there's therefore a conflict with policy 7 in NPF 4, historic assets, and policy 16 on quality homes in NPF 4. Also contrary to policies on design, historic environment, windows and doors, and residential areas within the local development plan. So for the applicant's case, it's summarised as follows. The proposal does comply fully with the development plan, that the reasons given in the decision notice are subjective and not based on guidance or founded in the local development plan. They make the case that the roof lights are a conservation style, by which they mean that it's fixed sort of flush with the slates, and that the work was high quality. The context is a rear lane, predominantly of garages and the relatively new Prince Albert flats, and they include photographs. That the roof lights are on an area of roof that's not overlooked by the properties. They address the central glazing bar, which was something that the case officer discusses in the report as a factor for a conservation style roof light, and they say that they would be willing to install that central glazing bar. They state that it complies with Historic Environment Policy for Scotland and the Managing Change Guidance Policy 6 of NPF 4, as the roof lights are of high quality and they respect the surroundings, and similar design policies within the local development plan. They state that the works maintain the building in good repair and that there's no size limit for roof lights in policy and guidance, that they comply with Policy 16 on quality homes in National Planning Framework and Policy 2 on amenity in terms of daylight, and that reducing the size of the roof lights would result in a patchwork on the roof and possible damage to the roof. So just going back to Policy 16 in NPF 4 on quality homes, the applicant expands on this and highlights the encouragement given to a range of high quality homes and housing relating to people with particular health conditions. And then in terms of the new information, they state that lack of light is an issue in terms of the applicant's ongoing health issues. So as that is new information, I will bring in our legal advisor and I have this slide on how to address new matters.
Good morning, convener and members. I'm Lisa Christie, one of the solicitors with the Planning and Environment team. And as we've heard before, Section 43B of the 1997 Act, as amended, restricts the ability of parties to introduce new matters at the review stage unless those matters are material to the determination of the case. So the Act says that a party is not to raise any matter which was not before the appointed officer unless they can demonstrate that A, the matter could not have been raised before that time, or B, that it's not B, and B, it was a result of exceptional circumstances. What it is we don't know that. Because we don't know from the applicant if it was, if it could have been raised before that time, or if it was a consequence of exceptional circumstances. But along with that, we also do have the public sector equality duty under the Equality Act. However, the information that the applicant provides, we wouldn't know if it would possibly qualify as a disability under the Equality Act. So if the members did decide to take this information into account, it would just be a piece of information that the members would have to weigh in the balance, along with all the other information and all the other circumstances of the case. If you do have any other questions, I can attempt to answer them. Hopefully that's been explained.
Yep, thank you, Ms. Christie. Does anyone have any questions in relation to the point of the consideration of new matters into this case? I'm not seeing any indication at the moment. Are members happy to take this into consideration? I will then go around the room. So I'll start off with Councillor Clark.
Yes, I'm happy to go ahead. I've got enough evidence.
In terms of this, the new matter, in terms of the health aspect into this case, are you happy to accept that into the overall evidence, Councillor Clark?
Yes, I'm happy to accept.
Okay, Councillor Copeland.
I can't see any reason why that couldn't have been put in at the start. Quite frankly, I think it's totally irrelevant. But I mean, I'm quite happy to go with the majority. If everybody thinks it's relevant, then we're quite happy to accept it. Personally, I think it's the answer would be no.
Councillor Bowes.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it into account.
Councillor Crockett.
I'm content to take it into account, Convener.
Okay, I am also content to take this into consideration at this point as well. So in terms of the majority, I think we're happy to continue at that point.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, members.
Ms. Green.
Thanks. So my final comments would be that in terms of consultations, the City Centre Community Council, there were no comments received. There were no representations. So at that point, I will hand back to you again, Chair, for a decision on how to proceed. And obviously the applicant expressed the view that they wished for a site visit. However, it's for members to decide on that. So I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So just find my bit in this. So we now need to consider, members, whether we have sufficient information in front of us to take a decision on the application. Members, a reminder that if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request that further written information be provided, hearings be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. At this moment, I believe that with the information provided by Ms. Green, I am happy to continue at this point. Councillor Bowes.
I'm happy to continue, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, happy to proceed today.
Thank you. Councillor Crockett.
Yeah, content to continue, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Happy to continue.
Thank you. As members feel they have sufficient information at this time, we will now hear from Ms. Green on the relevant policies and considerations for this review.
Okay, thanks. I'll share my slide again. Sorry, my system's very slow at the moment. Okay, in terms of national planning framework policies, as I mentioned in the previous case, policies 1, 2, and 3 tackling the climate crisis, nature crisis, and biodiversity gain. These are all overarching and they are relevant to almost every application. Policy 7 relating to historic assets and places. This really looks at only supporting proposals where they preserve or enhance the character of the conservation area and the setting of listed buildings. And then policy 14 on design and 16 on quality homes. I have some follow-up slides on those. So in terms of policy 16 on quality homes, there are several factors, and in terms of householder development, proposals will be supported where they don't have a detrimental impact on the character or environmental quality of the home and the surrounding area in terms of their size, design, and materials. And then I've also included this second factor about adaptations and homes relating to people with health conditions, and that those are supported. Policy 14 in terms of design. So proposals should be designed to improve the quality of an area, regardless of scale and their location. And then moving on to the policies in the local development plan. The properties zoned within a residential area. And I have a slide on that policy to follow. Policy D1 on design is similar to that within the National Planning Framework, which we've just covered. Policy D2 on amenity, that covers issues such as privacy, daylighting and sunlight. And the case officer didn't suggest in the reasons for refusal that there was any impact on other residents. Policy D6 on the historic environment, that again relates to the setting of the conservation area and the nearby listed buildings and the impact of the roof lights within that context. And then policy D8 on windows and doors is about retaining the traditional qualities of those features. In terms of the conservation area appraisal, that identifies this area as some of the earliest planned development in the conservation area, and it describes the mix of cottage style and higher terraces, which are all listed in recognition of their collective significance. And it describes the rear lanes as largely garden walls and domestic garages, although in this particular area there are a number of residential properties as well. So in terms of residential areas, so within residential areas, new household development will be approved in principle if it complies with the criteria. And there are several of those. Obviously, there's no additional development, so it's not overdevelopment in terms of criteria 1. The second criteria is relevant. Does it have an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area? There's no loss of open space and supplementary guidance. So the main relevance is in terms of criteria 2. We just move on to design policy. This talks about high standards of design, taking into account the context and the details of quality architecture and craftsmanship and materials. Again, it recognises that not all development will be of a scale that makes a significant placemaking impact, but that good design and detail adds to the overall attractiveness of the built environment. So finally, the evaluation is the primacy of the development plan, and that consists of NPF 4 and the local development plan 2023. So all applications should be determined in accordance with development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And in this case, would proposals, just move on. Yes, would proposals comply with the zoning policy on residential areas, and how would the proposal affect the character and amenity of the area? And in particular, the scale of the roof lights on the roof slope and the issue of the glazing bar. So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan, or are there material considerations indicating otherwise? And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Do members have any questions? I'm not seeing any hands at this point. Oh, Councillor Copeland.
Yes, just confirmation, convener. This building itself is not a listed building. The one at the front is a listed building, but this one on the lane is not. Is that right?
That's correct.
And this was built in the 1990s, 1970s.
The applicant says the 1970s.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Copeland. Any other questions from members? Okay, so in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I will highlight all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. Does anyone have anything to discuss? So in terms of myself, I feel that the roof lights actually probably add to the amenity of the resident living there. I noted that on the plans, the living room only had one window at the time, and this now elevates or increases the amount of light into the property. So in terms of policy 16, it sort of fits into that at the moment. In terms of policy 14, in terms of the visual look into the area, as it's a rear lane and there's no real overlooking views into the property, and as well as the local area, I don't think it actually detracts from that as much. I don't know how other members would be minded on that at the moment.
I'm happy to go with you, convener.
Okay. So there's no one else wishing to enter. We now move to determination. So as I've just stated, I'm happy to overturn the officer's recommendations on this and grant on terms of policy 16 and policy 14 as I've just described. I'll now turn to each member for their decision. So Councillor Clark.
I'm happy to go with your decision and overturn the decision. I've nothing really more to add than what you've said. I actually think that also considering that can be a dark lane, that lights actually might brighten that lane up a little bit as well. I say a little bit, but there is no complaints, so I'm happy to go with what you say.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Copeland.
Yes, I'm happy to grant permission on this one. I would like some clarity on what was meant by a window bar from Ms. Green, if that should be a condition or not. Just to get a wee bit of clarity on that.
Sure, screen.
Yes, what is meant by that is a vertical sort of subdivision down the roof light, which is something that's referred to in guidance for conservation style roof lights.
I don't think that would make much material difference, quite frankly. So I'm quite happy to grant as is.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Copeland. Councillor Crockett.
Same here, convener. Support you.
Thank you, Councillor Crockett. Councillor Bowes.
Yeah, also happy to support you, convener.
Thank you. As the local review body has agreed to overturn the decisions of the appointed officer, we now need to consider any conditions that should be placed on approval of the application. Do members have any further conditions they wish to state? Well, taking Ms. Green at this point as well. Okay, I'm not seeing any members indicating conditions at this point. Okay, so please note that the application has been approved and that decision notice from today's meeting will be issued to the applicant or agent in the forthcoming days. With that, members, that brings this morning and now this afternoon's meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your attendance, and we will see members at the upcoming planning committee in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you, convener.